Dale Peterson, heavy with bourbon and the weight of his own importance, lifted his glass at the Meridian Corporation's annual gala. The clinking sound seemed to echo the chill that ran down Tom Jensen's spine as Dale's gaze settled, like a predator's, on Sarah Miller. Sarah, he slurred, a smirk twisting his face, has been instrumental to my personal satisfaction this year. The air in the ballroom grew thick with nervous, uncertain laughter, leaving Tom exposed, a sudden, unfamiliar coldness spreading through his chest. Dale Peterson's voice, thick with too much bourbon, cut through the controlled hum of the Meridian Corporation's annual gala. He stood by the podium, a crystal glass in his hand, its contents swirling like liquid amber. His gaze, even from across the room, seemed to lock onto Sarah Miller, sitting beside me at table 7. The lights of the chandelier above us gleamed on the polished silverware, reflecting the nervous energy that suddenly tightened the air. He raised his glass, a predatory glint in his eye, and the room quieted. Sarah has been instrumental to my personal satisfaction this year, he slurred, drawing out the last word. The heavy phrase hung in the ballroom, an invisible weight. A ripple of nervous laughter spread quickly, like a virus, through the impeccably dressed crowd. It was the kind of laughter that sought to diffuse tension, but only made it worse. I felt a cold dread spread through my chest, settling deep in my stomach. The warmth of the room, the clinking of ice, the murmur of conversation, it all faded into a distant, muffled sound. Sarah's hand found mine under the table, squeezing tight. Her corporate smile, perfectly maintained for hours, seemed to falter just for a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. "Not here," she whispered through that smile, her voice barely audible. "Wait." The words were a quiet instruction, a silent plea. My knuckles, white against the dark wood of the table, wanted to rise, to push back a chair, to do something. But her grip, tight and insistent, held me in place. The next 93 minutes stretched out into an agonizing performance of professional composure. We ate our filet mignon, listened to a bland keynote speaker, and clapped politely at awards. Each moment felt like a tiny, unbearable piece of a larger humiliation. Sarah laughed at the appropriate times, exchanged pleasantries, and moved with a practiced grace that belied the tremor I felt in her hand. I watched the clock, each sweep of the second hand a small, deliberate torture. The champagne tasted like ash. Finally, the evening concluded. The valet brought our sedan around, its engine a low rumble in the cool night air. The moment we pulled away from the brightly lit hotel entrance, Sarah's calm mask shattered. She ripped off her pearl earrings, tossing them into the console with a sharp clatter. "That disgusting worm," she hissed, the words raw and brittle. Her voice was tight, unfamiliar. Stripped bare of its earlier control, she leaned her head against the window, watching the city lights blur. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my grip so tight it ached. I could feel the muscle in my jaw jump. "What did he mean, Sarah?" I asked, my voice flat, trying to make sense of the implied affair, of the public disgrace, of the sudden sickening doubt that had settled over everything. The question felt small and inadequate against the enormity of what I felt. She turned from the window, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. "He propositioned me 3 weeks ago," she said, her voice a low, bitter murmur. "In his office, he touched my leg." She paused, took a shallow breath. "He said if I didn't cooperate, my career at Meridian was over. He said he'd make sure I was blacklisted across the industry." The words came out in a rush, a painful confession. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked again, the question coming out sharper than I intended. The betrayal wasn't just Dale's, it was hers for not trusting me, for carrying this weight alone. "Because I handled it," she replied bitterly, turning back to the window. "I thought I had handled it. I put him off, made excuses. I thought it was over." Her shoulders slumped. "I thought about reporting him, the logical, clean-cut solution. We should go to HR, to the police." The words felt simple, direct, a path forward. She gave a humorless laugh. "Tom, you don't understand. Dale Peterson built Meridian. He has people everywhere. HR is his pocket. The board, half of them owe him favors. Even the police chief golfs with him every Thursday." She looked at me, a desperate plea in her eyes. He's untouchable. Her words felt like a cold, heavy blanket, smothering any flicker of justice. Then a flicker of hope, small and fragile, ignited in her eyes. He was boasting last month, she said, her voice quieter now, a thoughtful cadence, about the new security system in his office. High-tech, motion sensors, audio feeds, everything. Said it was top of the line. Her gaze met mine, a spark of an idea. If those recordings still exist, she whispered, everything would be there. Him touching me, the threats, all of it. The seed of a plan, risky and undefined, began to form between us on the drive home. The anger in my gut, which had been a dull ache, slowly sharpened into a controlled, burning rage. Then it's a good thing there are two of us, I said, taking at her hand again, my grip firm, no longer out of dread, but out of a sudden, fierce resolve. Monday morning dawned with a cruel, indifferent normalcy. The rising sun cast long, weak shadows across our kitchen floor, ignoring the weight of the weekend. Sarah, moving with a quiet resolve, donned her armor. A severe navy suit, tailored precisely, its lines sharp and unyielding. Her makeup was minimal, just enough to present a professional facade, leaving her eyes clear and unwavering. She looked ready for battle, but one fought in hushed tones and knowing glances. Remember the plan, she said, her voice steady as she adjusted the lapel of her jacket. Act normal. Gather information. Trust no one. She met my gaze, a silent pact passing between us. The words hung in the air, a reminder of the subtle, dangerous game we were now playing. She picked up her briefcase, its leather gleaming, and walked out the door into the false promise of a new week. I spent the morning in my own office trying to focus on quarterly reports, but my mind kept drifting to Sarah. I imagined her navigating the Meridian hallways. The office atmosphere, I knew, would be thick with awkward silence and averted glances. The whispers from Friday night's gala would still be fresh, tainting every interaction. It was the kind of environment that could slowly erode a person, chip away at their resolve, without a single open confrontation. Midday, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. R called me in meeting alone. R for Peterson. The anonymity of the initial made it feel more urgent. My stomach tightened. I immediately texted back, don't go. It was a reflex, a desperate attempt to shield her. Her reply came almost instantly. Have to. Declining looks guilty. Room 713 instead of his office. The message painted a clear picture. Room 713. That detail struck me. Dale Peterson's office had a reputation for being heavily guarded, almost a fortress, but room 713 was a standard, impersonal conference room, used for everything from team reviews to vendor presentations. No personal pictures, no elaborate decor, and crucially, no built-in recording equipment that I knew of. He chose it for a reason, I realized. He wanted no trace. He wanted deniability. The move was calculated, cold. At 1:45, I positioned myself near the elevator banks on Sarah's floor, pretending to work on my laptop. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the muffled sounds of office life, the occasional ding of an elevator arriving. It all formed a mundane backdrop to the sharp tension I felt. My fingers typed meaningless words on the keyboard, my eyes scanning, my ears straining. Every minute felt like Palmer. At 1:58, Sarah emerged from the elevator, walking with purpose, her navy suit a stark line against the muted office decor. Our eyes met for a fleeting second. As she passed, her voice was a low, almost imperceptible whisper. Phone recording in my jacket pocket. Her gaze didn't linger, didn't betray a hint of urgency, yet the message was clear, precise. She continued on, turning the corner toward the room 713, her footsteps echoing faintly. A minute later, the elevator chimed again. Dale Peterson stepped out, a bulky, imposing figure, his expensive suit stretched tight across his frame. He was late, a deliberate power move meant to keep her waiting, to assert control. He nodded curtly in my direction, his eyes passing over me without a flicker of recognition, a non-entity. He adjusted his tie, a gesture of casual dominance, and then followed Sarah's path towards the conference room. I waited for the faint click of the door closing behind him. Then I pushed my laptop into its bag and moved with a quiet urgency towards a utility room adjacent to 713. It was a small space mostly used for cleaning supplies and extra chairs, smelling faintly of lemon polish. I left the door ajar a crack, just enough to catch the low rumble of voices from next door. I couldn't make out words, not clearly, but I could hear the tones. I needed to be close enough, ready to intervene if the sound changed, if a sudden shift in pitch indicated something was wrong. My heart hammered against my ribs, a dull drum. The meeting lasted 17 minutes. I timed it on my watch. 17 minutes of muffled, indistinct conversation. Dale's voice alternating between what sounded like soothing persuasion and stern warning. Sarah's voice remained professionally neutral, a low, steady hum in unwavering presence. Each minute crawled by, thick with unspoken possibilities. Finally, the door opened. Dale emerged first, straightening his tie, a practiced, almost bored expression on his face. He glanced around, not seeing me, before heading back towards the elevators. Sarah followed a moment later, her face expressionless, a careful blankness that revealed nothing. She walked past me, still not making eye contact, a ghost of a shadow passing through the bright office lights. I waited a few more minutes, ensuring Dale was gone, before quietly leaving the utility room. I found Sarah already in her car in the employee parking lot, her hands shaking slightly as she unlocked the door. The sound of the lock clicking was sharp in the quiet afternoon air. She slipped into the driver's seat, avoiding my gaze for a moment, then looked at me, her face pale. "He offered me a deal," she said, her voice strained. "Let me guess," I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. "Transfer to the Singapore office, significant promotion, 20% salary increase. Exile." I knew how these things worked in corporate America. It was a common tactic, a way to remove a problem discreetly, to make it look like a reward while effectively silencing it. She nodded slowly. "And an NDA so restrictive I couldn't even tell you what happened." She looked at her hands, still trembling slightly on the steering wheel. "I told him I needed time to consider." The words were a calculated deception. Buying time. That night, the house felt heavy and quiet. We ate a silent dinner, our eyes darting to the windows, to the street outside, a nervous habit born of the knowledge that we were stepping onto dangerous ground. After confirming, as best we could, that we weren't followed, a quick, circuitous drive around the neighborhood, a double check of parked cars, Tom initiated phase 1 of our plan. The air in our small home office was thick with the faint scent of ozone from the humming computer. As Meridian's senior systems analyst, Tom knew the network like the back of his hand. He moved with a practiced ease, his fingers flying across the keyboard, lines of code scrolling rapidly on the screen. He deployed a shadow protocol, a ghost in the machine designed to go unnoticed. It wasn't a hack, not exactly. More like a discreet tap, a mirror to capture all data transmitted by Dale Peterson's private security system. Dale had boasted about its sophistication, unknowingly giving Tom the blueprint. The hours ticked by, marked only by the soft click of the keyboard and the whir of the computer fans. I sat beside Tom, watching the progress bar fill, a slow, agonizing crawl. Sleep felt impossible, a luxury we couldn't afford. The cold coffee in my mug grew colder. By morning, the green light glowed on the screen. Download complete. We had it. 6 months of recordings from Dale's office, a vast archive of his professional life, and hopefully his dirty secrets. My hands trembled as I clicked on the file labeled Peterson Office Security 0322. That was the date, 3 weeks ago, when he had first cornered Sarah. The screen flickered to life. Dale Peterson's office, elegant and imposing, appeared. There was Dale, seated behind his large mahogany desk, and there was Sarah, in a crisp gray suit, facing him from a chair. The audio was clear, unnervingly so. Dale's opening was smooth, almost charming, discussing a new project, praising Sarah's work. Then, the shift. It was subtle at first, a lowered voice, a lean forward. His words began to stray from professional matters. His expectations were explicit, graphic, far worse than Sarah had described in the car. He talked about special arrangements in mutual understanding and a sickeningly familiar corporate euphemism for sexual favors. I watched, my jaw tight, as he reached out, his hand disappearing from view, but the subtle flinch in Sarah's shoulders told me everything. Upon her refusal, his demeanor shifted instantly. The faux seductive maquillage dropped, replaced by something cold and hard, a predator scorned. His voice, still low, became laced with a venomous edge. He rose from his desk, moving with an almost imperceptible quickness. He physically positioned himself between Sarah and the door, a casual block that felt anything but. His body language screamed territoriality. I decide who succeeds at Meridian, who gets promoted, who gets fired, Dale snarled, his voice a low growl. The words, clear on the recording, were a chilling testament to his power. Is your precious moral high ground worth your career? He threatened, his face inches from hers. The camera, fixed in the corner, captured the subtle tremor of her hands, the slight widening of her eyes, but also the admirable composure that held her steady. Her response was quiet, remarkably composed despite the clear intimidation. Please move so I can leave, Mr. Peterson. This conversation is over. Her voice was steady, firm, a line drawn in the sand. Dale stared at her for a long moment, his eyes narrowed. Nothing's over until I say it is, he replied, a chilling promise. But then, after another moment, he finally stepped aside, a slow, deliberate movement. Think carefully about your next steps, he added, his voice regaining a veneer of calm, but the menace still clear. The recording ended. The screen went dark, replaced by the desktop background. Stunned silence filled our living room, broken only by the hum of the computer. The air felt heavy, charged. That's textbook sexual harassment, I said, my voice tight, the anger a hot coil in my gut. My hands were clenched into fists, with a side of assault and criminal threatening. We take this to the authorities. This is everything we need. It felt so clear, so undeniable. Sarah shook her head slowly, her face pale in the faint glow of the monitor. No, she said, her voice quiet but firm. We illegally accessed the company's servers, Tom. His lawyers would bury us. They'd turn us into the criminals. They'd say this is doctored, coerced, anything to discredit it. She looked at the blank screen, then at me. We need more. Something he can't twist. Something undeniable, something that comes from him, not from our back door. We need to know if there were others, Sarah said, her voice quiet but firm, as the lingering image of Dale Peterson's sneering face faded from the screen. The statement marked the beginning of Phase 2 of our plan, a shift from passive observation to active investigation. If Dale was a predator, he wouldn't have stopped with just Sarah. Predators rarely did. Over the next few days, Sarah began to subtly reach out. She dug through old company directories, LinkedIn profiles, and professional networks, compiling a list of women who had left Meridian under unusual circumstances over the past several years. Her messages were carefully worded, seemingly innocuous, referencing old projects or shared contacts, planting a seed without revealing the true intent. Most of them didn't return her calls or emails. The silence was its own kind of answer, heavy with unspoken history. Some responded but remained guarded, their words polite but distant, hesitant to speak. The fear, even years later, was palpable in their clipped sentences, in their quick goodbyes. It was a testament to Dale's reach, to the quiet power he wielded even over those who had escaped his orbit. However, 5 women eventually agreed to meet, separately at first, then in a quiet online forum Sarah set up. Their stories, pieced together over hushed phone calls and late-night messages, were disturbingly similar to Sarah's own. The pattern was so precise, it felt like a grotesque rehearsed play. Brenda, formerly in finance, spoke first, her voice still edged with a residual anger. He called me into his office for a performance review, she recounted, the screen showing her face, lines of weariness around her eyes. Then it quickly turned. He said it was part of the company culture, unspoken rules, a way to get ahead. When Brenda refused, her performance reviews, previously stellar, suddenly tanked. She was moved to a dead-end project, her budget slashed, her team slowly reassigned. 3 months later, she was dismissed, severance package contingent on an NDA. Amy, from product development, had left Meridian 2 years prior. He has a type, she observed, her voice cool and analytical. Ambitious, competent women. Women who are good at their cheese but maybe don't have strong industry connections outside Meridian. No powerful mentors, no big names to back them up. Amy had been offered a similar opportunity and upon her rejection, found herself mysteriously excluded from key meetings, her ideas plagiarized, her contributions ignored. She left, she said, because the air became too thin to breathe. Karen, Dale's former executive assistant, was perhaps the most direct. Her face was grim on the video call. "I was paid to go away," she stated plainly. She had witnessed several closed-door meetings with other women, seen the dismissive way Dale treated female staff who resisted him. When it was her turn, she told them, she signed a restrictive NDA in exchange for 6 months' salary and benefits. "It was either that or be run into the ground. My kids needed food." Her words were a stark reminder of the financial leverage Dale held. Each woman's story, laid out one after another, followed a chilling pattern. Isolation, a carefully orchestrated one-on-one meeting, the crude proposition veiled in corporate speak, the polite but firm refusal, and then the inevitable, brutal retaliation. None had officially reported Dale. All had left Meridian with damaged careers, shaken confidence, and a quiet bitterness that still lingered years later. They had simply vanished, replaced by new, eager faces, the cycle continuing. Sarah, her own face etched with the pain of recognition, looked at the 5 women on the screen. The moment was heavy, pregnant with expectation. "Would any of you be willing to come forward?" she asked, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the silence. A nervous silence followed, heavy with fear and the weight of their past compromises, their decisions to protect themselves and their families. The virtual room held its breath. The seconds stretched. Then, slowly, Brenda nodded. Her gaze was steady, a spark of shared defiance in her eyes. Amy followed, her lips pressed into a thin line, a silent acknowledgement of solidarity. Karen, after a moment, gave a small, resolute nod. 2 others, hesitant at first, eventually followed suit. The collective decision, unspoken but understood, hung in the air. They began to cautiously discuss what it would take, what protection they would need, to speak out. The conversation shifted from shared pain to a nascent, fragile hope for justice. The 5 women, their initial hesitation giving way to a shared resolve, agreed to discreetly compile their testimonies. A quiet network formed in the shadows, fueled by a collective history of silence and a burgeoning desire for justice. Each account, meticulously written, documented the dates, locations, and explicit details of Dale Peterson's propositions and subsequent retaliations. They were careful, precise, knowing that every word would be scrutinized. Tom and Sarah worked tirelessly, often late into the night, to anonymize the digital evidence. The recordings from Dale's office were stripped of any metadata that could trace them back to Tom, carefully embedded with timestamps and markers that would prove their authenticity without revealing their source. Corroborating documents, old emails, performance reviews, transfer requests, were gathered and cross-referenced. The result was a secure package, robust and undeniable, designed to withstand the inevitable corporate legal assault. They decided to approach an investigative journalist, understanding that a third party was essential to break the story credibly. Their choice was Martha, a seasoned veteran known for her relentless pursuit of corporate corruption and her unwavering integrity. She had a reputation for not backing down, a quality they desperately needed. Meeting in a quiet diner on the outskirts of the city, away from prying eyes, they laid out their case. Martha, her gaze sharp and discerning, listened intently to their collective accounts. She saw the undeniable pattern, the chilling consistency in each woman's story. Her years of experience told her this was not a coincidence, not isolated incidents, but a systemic abuse of power. She reviewed the anonymized digital evidence, her brow furrowed in concentration. The recordings were damning. Over the next few weeks, Martha began her own independent investigation. She verified facts, quietly contacting sources within Meridian, former employees who were willing to talk off the record, confirming the toxic undercurrents that had permeated the company for years. Her meticulous work built a foundation of undeniable truth, preparing for the storm she knew would follow. Then the first article dropped. It was a bombshell expose published on a reputable online news outlet detailing allegations against a senior executive at Meridian without naming Dale Peterson yet. The piece chronicled a pattern of sexual harassment, career sabotage, in a culture of fear. Rumors ripped through Meridian like wildfire. The article created an immediate, palpable tension in the hallways, a nervous energy that vibrated beneath the veneer of corporate professionalism. Dale Peterson, though unnamed, was cornered. He released a public statement through Meridian's PR department, denying everything, dismissing the claims as baseless attacks by disgruntled former employees seeking to discredit him and the company. It was a classic deflection designed to sow doubt and shift blame. Meridian's board, under immense pressure from investors and facing a looming public relations crisis, announced a superficial internal investigation. It was a predictable move designed to appease, to project an image of responsibility without genuinely addressing the problem. They knew, as did Sarah and Tom, that it would be little more than a whitewash. Sarah and I lived in a constant state of fear. Every shadow seemed a potential threat, every strange car a surveillance team. Our relationship, once easy and comfortable, was now strained by the secrecy, the stress, the endless anticipation. Sleep was fitful, conversation often hushed, our eyes always scanning. It was a heavy weight, pressing down on everything. If you're listening to this, stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. More whispers reached us, passed through the informal network of affected women. Other women, encouraged by the article's courage, were considering stepping forward, their own dormant fears slowly giving way to a flicker of bravery. The dam was beginning to crack. Martha, relentless, prepared her follow-up piece. This time it would carry names, not just Sarah's, but the combined weight of more testimonies, of women willing to risk everything. She assured the women that their identities would be protected until they were ready to step fully into the light, giving them control over their own narrative. Knowing that Dale would eventually come after the source, after the digital fingerprints, I worked late nights, fortifying our digital defenses, encrypting, obfuscating, creating layers of protection around the evidence. The quiet anxiety in our home gradually gave way to a grim determination. We knew the fight had just truly begun, and it would be brutal. The second article hit like a hammer blow, its digital headline blazing across screens. This time, Martha pulled no punches. It named Dale Peterson explicitly, painting him not as a senior executive, but as a predator, backed by sworn, detailed statements from Brenda, Amy, Karen, and the two other women who had found the courage to step forward. Their stories, once whispered in fear, were now shouted from the digital pages, each a testament to his calculated cruelty. Almost simultaneously, the recordings from Dale's office, the damning audio of his propositions and threats, were anonymously leaked to other major news outlets. The sound clips played on local news channels, embedded in online reports, leaving no room for doubt. They corroborated every word the women had said, turning whispers into undeniable facts. Public outrage erupted. It spread like wildfire across social media, fueled by hashtags and shared links, dominating local news channels and morning talk shows. Meridian Corporation, once a beacon of Midwestern industry, was now a symbol of corporate rot. The phones at their headquarters rang ceaselessly, a cacophony of condemnation. Meridian's stock plummeted, wiping billions from its market cap in a matter of hours. Investors, furious and panicked, demanded immediate action. Key clients, wary of association with such a scandal, threatened to pull their substantial business, sending shockwaves through the executive suites. The carefully constructed edifice of Dale Peterson's power began to crumble. The board of directors, no longer able to sweep it under the rug, convened an emergency meeting. It was held behind closed doors, but the outcome was swift and brutal. Dale Peterson was summarily fired, his golden parachute ripped away, his carefully constructed career in ruins. The terse press release cited gross misconduct and a breach of corporate ethics. There was no mention of the internal investigation, no pretense of a lengthy review. He was simply gone. Local law enforcement, now armed with irrefutable digital evidence and facing intense public pressure, opened a criminal investigation. The wheels of justice, once seemingly stuck, began to turn with an undeniable momentum. Dale Peterson, the untouchable, was suddenly very much within reach. Sarah and I, though vindicated, faced the personal fallout. Our professional association with Meridian was irrevocably tarnished, making future employment uncertain. The lingering emotional toll of months spent in fear, in secrecy, in silent battle would not disappear overnight. It was a heavy weight we would carry. Our marriage tested by fire, by the constant anxiety and the quiet strain of our secret fight, endured. But it bore the scars of the battle fought in silence and shadows, a deeper understanding of each other's strengths and vulnerabilities, a quiet, raw bond forged in the crucible of conflict. The other women, Brenda, Amy, Karen, and the others, found a measure of justice and solidarity. Their voices, once silenced by fear and power, were finally heard. Their careers, though forever altered by their experiences at Meridian, were no longer defined by shame but by their courage. Dale Peterson faced legal charges. His public image was shattered, his name forever synonymous with corporate abuse, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. He too would bear the scars, though of a different kind. Months later, Sarah and I sat on our porch, watching the Midwestern sunset paint the sky with shades of orange and purple. The air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. The birds chirped their evening songs, oblivious to the battles fought and won. The victory felt hollow, tinged with the sadness of what was lost. The innocence we once held about the world, the sense of security we had, it was all gone, replaced by a weary wisdom. The price of justice, we learned, was not paid by one person alone. He paid the price, Sarah said quietly, her voice soft in the dusk. But so did we. She leaned into my side, her head resting on my shoulder. I nodded, wrapping an arm around her, holding her close. The long, slow process of healing had just truly begun in the quiet heartland under the vast, indifferent sky. The second article, published days later, was a devastating blow. Martha named Richard Kendall, backed by sworn statements from Meredith, Alyssa, Tara, and two other courageous women. The recordings from his office, showing his explicit propositions and veiled threats, were anonymously leaked to other major news outlets, corroborating every detail. Public outrage erupted, spreading virally across social media and dominating local news channels. Meridian's stock plummeted, investors demanded immediate action, and key clients threatened to pull their business. The board, no longer able to sweep it under the rug, convened an emergency meeting. Richard Kendall was summarily fired, his golden parachute ripped away, his carefully constructed career in ruins. Local law enforcement, now armed with irrefutable evidence and facing public pressure, opened a criminal investigation. Jessica and I, though vindicated, faced the personal fallout, job insecurity, a tarnished professional association with Meridian, and the lingering emotional toll of months spent in fear. Our marriage, tested by fire, endured, but bore the scars of the battle fought in silence and shadows. The other women found a measure of justice and solidarity, their voices finally heard, their careers forever altered. Richard Kendall faced legal charges, his public image shattered, his name forever synonymous with corporate abuse. Months later, Jessica and I sat on our porch, watching the quiet Midwestern sunset. The victory felt hollow, tinged with the sadness of what was lost, the innocence, the sense of security. He paid the price, Jessica said quietly, but so did we. I nodded, wrapping an arm around her, the long, slow process of healing just beginning in the quiet heartland.